welcome back. So in today's video we are going to be color grading some videos in DaVinci Resolve 17. The videos that we're going to be color grading today are shot on the GoPro Hero 9, and I think I'm going to do one which is underwater and the other which is above water because the way I grade them is slightly different. Okay, the first clip that we are going to be color grading is this underwater GoPro clip taken with the GoPro Hero 9 with the following settings. So to start with, we're going to be in the edit tab and we're going to drag our clip from the media pool into the timeline, and then we're going to move on to the color tab on the bottom here to start with our grading. First thing we're going to do is we're going to create some nodes. You can do this by holding shift and pressing S, or you can also right click on the clips and press add node, and this just makes it a lot easier to follow what I'm going to be doing. So the first node I'm going to leave alone. On the second node I'm going to adjust the exposure and the lighting of the image, and on the last one we are going to be changing the colors and actually grading the footage. So let's start on, click on the number 2 where we're going to apply the changes to the exposure, and we're going to do this by first going down to this bottom right hand corner, and we're going to change this into the waveform where we can see the luminosity of our video or how well exposed our video is. And I'm going to try to explain this real quick. The shadows in the darker areas are usually closer to the zeros, and then the brightest areas are at the top on the 1023. And I'm going to play around with the brightness of this clip and show you. So the darker videos, like shown here, where there is very little light, are usually found look like this, and all the bright videos with lots of light look something like this. And you want the light to be spread out pretty evenly throughout to have a nice looking clip. So I'm gonna go back to the original clip now. This original clip that we had is actually pretty well exposed. You can see that the whites and the blacks are pretty well balanced out. We're not actually going to make too many changes on the lighting of this clip, but ideally you want the darkest parts to just about hit 0 and the brightest parts of your clip to just hit the 1023 line. So we are going to adjust this by, you can do this a couple ways, but I'm going to go to the lift and I'm going to drag this down to move my clip closer to 0, and then I'm going to go to the gain and drag this upwards to get the highlights a little bit higher, closer to the 1000 mark. We can also adjust this by, if we go to the shadows, which is here, and decrease the value, we are going to get more darker parts in the shadows. On the other hand, if we increase the shadows value, we're going to get brighter. We're going to actually be able to see what's in the shadows like this. So for this clip, I am going to darken the shadows a bit so we get a little bit of contrast. And with the highlights, you can do the same thing, increase the highlights like this, or decrease it by dragging it to the left. And for this video, I am going to leave it around here. And now on to changing the colors. So we're going to move to the next node, which is number 3 up here. And here we're going to work on changing the colors. First, we're going to change the waveform screen into the parade, so we can see the reds, the greens, and the blues. And as you can see on this clip already, the reds are a little bit lower than the greens and the blues, which is pretty common for underwater clips as red light gets lost first. We're going to try to balance these colors out a little bit so they're a little bit more even, and we can do this on the left hand side in the primaries. We can do this in the bars or in the wheel screen, whichever you prefer. I'm going to do this in the bars today. And in this, on the part which says offset, we can adjust how the colors are on the right hand side. So if I move the reds up, the clip is going to get more and more red until it looks like this. And on the other hand, if I move it all the way down, we're going to lose the reds completely. I think a lot of underwater clips look a little bit like this, where the reds are lost. So this is the best way to correct underwater clips for me. So we're going to start by moving the reds up a little bit. The greens are a little bit strong in this clip, so I'm going to move them down. And the blues are still strong, so I'm going to move them down. From here on, it kind of just depends on how you want your clips to look. I'm not going to edit this clip too much, so I think I'm just going to add some contrast a little bit. And then I want my clip to look bright and vibrant, so I'm going to add a bit more light in the highlights. add a bit of color boost, and here with the midtones and details you can make your clip look sharper or more smooth. So I'm going to increase the sharpness a little bit in the midtones, and I think for this video I'm going to leave it here. So now let's take a look between before grading and after grading. The next clip that we're going to be working on is again shot on the GoPro Hero 9, but this time it's above water, not underwater. So again, I'm back on the color tab and I'm going to look at the waveform here, and as you can see the clip overall is kind of blown out in the highlights. It's too bright, so I'm going to start by adjusting these. And before I do that, I'm going to create the nodes again, so hold the shift and click S to make 2 nodes. And we're going to start by adjusting the luminosity on the second one. So as you can see in the waveform, we've got to decrease the highlights. So I'm going to start by dragging the gains down until the top hits the 1000 mark. And then the lift, I am going to drag this down as well until the shadows or the darkest parts of the image hit the 0 mark, like this. Already the video looks a lot nicer. The highlights of the sand aren't blown out too much. Next I'm going to add some details in the midtones by dragging this to the right. What this does is it's effectively increasing the sharpness so that there is more detail, like you can see in the rocks. And I'm going to increase the contrast a little bit. And for this clip I want to grade it to give it a more darker cinematic feel, so I'm going to decrease the gain even more so the clip is not too bright. I think I'm gonna leave it around here. And before we move on to the color grading in the third node, let's take a quick look at how the video looks right now. So for the purpose of this video, I'm going to show you a bunch of stuff you can do with the color grading. We're going to move to this third node, but I wouldn't recommend going over the top with the grading process as it can ruin your video if you do too much. So for this one, let's start by increasing the temperature a little bit to give it a orangish tint. I think I'm going to leave it around here. And then I want to give it a more darker kind of darker dramatic look. So I'm going to decrease the gains a little bit. Also decrease the highlights and the shadows a little. Another thing you can do is you can add a small vignette from the library on the side. So you go scroll down to the vignette. If you just drag this onto the node, it's going to look like this, and you don't really want it too strong, so you're going to move the size to the right so it looks a little bit like this, so it's very subtle. And also I'm going to decrease the saturation a little bit on this clip, and I still think the whites in the sand is a little bit too strong, so push the highlights down a little bit more. And for this video I think I'm going to leave it looking like this. So yeah, let's take one last look at the before and after of the process. And I think I've gone over the top on some of the color grading parts, but it was a good way to show you guys what's possible to do in this program. Hey, so thank you very much for watching all the way through. Hope that helped you out a little, and this was a little intro to color grading using DaVinci Resolve 17. And if you have any questions about color grading or video editing or GoPro, then I'll be happy to answer in the comment section. And yeah, as always, I'll see you in the next video, and please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Right, see you in the next one.